When one tries desperately to be good and wonderful and perfect, then all the more the shadow develops a definite will to be black and evil and destructive. I was one of those, always trying to be the good boy, the nice guy, the one that was never troublesome, that was selfless and always ready to help out. But always trying to be nice comes at a price. In our civilized societies, with all their structures, demands, pressures, and expectations, we naturally form a persona that is socially acceptable. Jung described it as, the persona is the mask we wear in relation to the world and others. It is not necessarily who we really are, but who we want and pretend to be to others, and many times to ourselves. We all have a persona. This is how we are able to make our way in our sophisticated societies. However, this persona is often extremely one-sided. It contains only the qualities approved of by our surroundings. The mask feels like us, but it is largely shaped by the outer world. It's a compromise between the individual and society. There's no problem having a persona when you are well aware of it. The trouble comes when you forget and start to strongly identify yourself with it. At some point in my life, I started to strongly identify with my mask. I was very convinced that I was only good. I believed that there was nothing more to me than only this perfect man who takes care of everyone, who is kind and always available. The more I identified with just that mask, with only the considered good qualities, the more I had to deny and reject the parts of me that didn't fit. My selfishness, my anger, my irresponsibility, my frustration, my wildness. There's nothing wrong with these qualities that are considered good. But the problem arises when we think we are just that. When we identify ourselves with nothing more than just our good. It creates a split within us, because the truth is that our persona is only a small part of our whole personality. When we, or as Jung would say, when our ego starts to identify too strongly with one side of ourselves, we unknowingly send the opposite qualities into exile. When we choose to always be kind, we disown our selfishness. When we choose to always be available, we disown our boundaries. When we choose to always be happy, we disown our sadness. When we choose to be responsible and serious, we forsake our playfulness and spontaneity. But these qualities don't just conveniently disappear. They become part of what Jung called the shadow. The shadow contains all the repressed parts of ourselves we refuse to see or accept. They are exiled into the caves of our being and become part of what Jung calls our personal unconscious. Jung said the following about our shadow. Unfortunately, there can be no doubt that man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. We all have a shadow, because we all have had to create multiple personas to operate in society and in our circles of friends and family. We all have had to sacrifice a big part of our personality to be accepted. It's part of being human. But the more and the longer we pretend that we don't have a shadow, that we are only made of goodness, the blacker and denser it becomes. What Jung means here is that the more one-sided we become, the greater the imbalance within us. The more we identify with our good, the more powerful our bad becomes in our unconscious. In other words, when we refuse to face our hidden parts, when we say, "That's not me," or "I'm never angry, I'm never jealous," everything we disown automatically gains force in our unconscious. So why does it gain force? Because this is how our psyche works. Our psyche is constantly working towards balance. Jung believed the psyche to be a self-regulating system that maintains itself in equilibrium as the body does. Whenever a psychic process takes us too far in one direction, the psyche seeks to regulate the balance. Our psyches are the totality of all psychological processes, both conscious and unconscious. When we become too one-sided, when our ego only identifies with being good, our psyche will seek to find a new equilibrium. It works like a scale. If one side becomes too heavy, when we consciously over-identify with one extreme, say our goodness, kindness, and selflessness, the unconscious will automatically build up the opposing qualities, our selfishness, aggression, and wildness, to compensate. As Jung says, the unconscious compensates the attitude of the conscious mind and thus tries to restore the balance of the whole psyche. The material in our unconscious isn't dead, it's fully alive. We are just not conscious of it. Our unconscious often compensates for our one-sidedness through our dreams. Personally, I remember I used to have very violent dreams. Whilst in my conscious life, I was everything but violent. I would dream of war, of killing, and of blood. Another way our unconscious may compensate is through projection. If we cannot see our own repressed qualities, the unconscious will project or send them outward onto others. And so we may become insanely irritated at others, often because they embody a part of ourselves we are denying. If we continue to pretend we don't have a shadow, our unconscious can also erupt in more destructive ways. This can happen through addictions, rage outbursts, manipulation, passive aggression, or a neurosis like depression. All of these ways are compensations for our one-sidedness, for our narrow understanding of ourselves. The psyche demands balance, and when we live too long in one polarity, the other kicks down the door. These compensations seem at first very inconvenient, especially in the ego's eyes, as they contradict the behavior or the ideas you have about yourself. Naturally, you will try to keep rejecting this part of yourself, but over time, it becomes more and more exhausting to do so. When we start to actually see the contradictions in ourselves, we can see the efforts from our unconscious as a gift, because it's through our dreams, our projections, our irritation towards others, our addictions or passive aggressiveness, that we can start to see there's more to us than we think. But we have to be willing to see it, and that's the hardest part. Naturally, we have a lot of resistance to acknowledging certain parts of ourselves. For me, it was very difficult to admit that, yes, I can be selfish, I can be angry, I can be wild, I can be reckless, I can be irresponsible at times. It was very difficult to wear these qualities as proudly as I was wearing their opposites. When we have a strong conscious idea about ourselves, and when the whole world knows that they can count on you as this self-sacrificing person who is always kind and available, it is incredibly daunting. to make amendments? Will you still get the same love and approval if you acknowledge and accept that you, too, can be incredibly self-centered? You don't know, and this is what you will risk if you are determined to become more whole. As Jung says, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. When we take the risk and start to see and embrace the paradoxes inside of us, we are making a big step towards becoming a more whole individual. However, an important point to make here is that there's nothing wrong with becoming one-sided. In fact, Jung said it's unavoidable and necessary. We need it in our lives. Whenever we focus on something, like a goal, to develop a talent, or to follow a certain career path, we inevitably become one-sided. It's when we direct ourselves somewhere that we select. When we decide to go left, we do not decide to go right. We emphasize and select the qualities needed for our decision to go left, and we de-emphasize the others. It's how we develop and focus our energy in our lives. Jung said the following: everything requires for its existence its opposite. For example, the ego needs the unconscious, and the unconscious needs the ego. Good would not exist without evil, and there can be no beauty without ugliness. It is the contrast that creates the tension of opposites, and it is this tension that creates life. This tension of opposites is how our life energy is flowing. Without this tension, there is no movement. We are not meant to solve this tension by choosing one side over the other, by holding the opposites, not collapsing into one, not denying the other. We allow the psyche to move toward wholeness, toward the self. Wholeness is the embrace of your full nature, the light, the shadow, the noble, the ugly, the responsible adult, and the wild, messy child. But this requires us to let go of the self-image we hold on to so tightly. And this takes time. At some point, I stopped caring about this image of myself. I no longer wanted to say that I am this or I am that by definition, because the truth is, I am probably both. The dance between opposites is how life moves, like the pendulum swinging, like the snake moving, like the tides returning, like the breath that expands and contracts. We are not meant to freeze our whole lives in one pose, but to move fluidly between the many aspects of our personality. Sometimes in my life, maybe I will lean more to the left, and sometimes more to the right. And at times I may find myself at an extreme again. And this is not wrong either. As Jung says, every extreme attitude is a flight from the self, and the return to the self is always through the opposite of what one has been. Sometimes we have to experience the extreme other side of the pole to come back to a balance, to the middle ground. This running to the opposite is called an Enantiodromia. This concept comes from old Greek philosopher Heraclitus and was used by Jung to describe the law that we will inevitably convert at some point from one side of our personality to the other. The challenge here is to find a means through which you can express and live this other extreme without being destructive. So for example, if we are learning to embrace our anger, instead of screaming and tearing things apart, you might use a pillow, a punching bag, or another outlet like art or music to allow that energy to flow through you. Finding a non-destructive way is critical. because only then can we integrate these parts of ourselves without adding harm or regret. It's not about becoming reckless. It's about channeling the energy of being reckless in a safe way with awareness. Allow yourself to move between the poles, between your opposites. Let the energy flow. However much the world around you likes and prefers to put you in a box, go in there with only one foot and leave the other out to remember how much more there is to you. I am experimenting now with holding my selfishness and anger. And it actually feels really good to finally hold this energy instead of rejecting it. When we turn to what's in our shadow, we not only find pure darkness, there is a lot of gold to find there. For example, my selfishness has taught me the importance of taking care of my own needs. And my anger has taught me again how to be assertive and set healthy boundaries that feel right. But along the way, it has been difficult too. Not everyone understands my behavior. I seem so different from who they thought I was. And a lot of people reject this behavior. And at times, I also find it very difficult, because I know it's not considered good behavior. But as Carl Jung says, I'd rather be whole than good. Thank you for watching this video. What is your biggest takeaway? Let me know in the comments. Thank you, and I will see you next time.